In 1978, a young German man entered the United States as a student looking for the American dream. For the next 30 years, he would live under a succession of aliases, all while claiming to be an actor, a director, an art collector, a physicist, a cardiologist, a world negotiator, an English royal, and a member of one of the most famous families in America. This is the unbelievably true story of Christian Gerhartsreiter, con man and killer. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. Or for our Welsh friends, croissant.
Nice. I'm impressed.
Yes.
I get more impressed every week.
Well, you know.
Way to go, babe.
I gotta give a shout out to my Welsh descendants.
Yeah. You look very Welsh and Irish for sure. With a German name. We're about as white as you can get.
Well,
it's crazy.
You say that to all the redheads.
I do.
Yeah.
I say it to all my favorite. You're my favorite redhead, of course. Of course. Well, I just want to start by saying wherever you're listening, like, rate, and review. If you're watching on our new YouTube channel, just subscribe. Click that button right over there.
Yeah, and check out the YouTube channel. It's fun.
And we're having a good time with it.
Yeah.
I mean, come try it out. See what you think. We've had people say they feel like they're in the studio chit-chatting with us, which is exactly what we wanted.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
If you want to be even more a part of the crowd, you can join the In-Laws and Outlaws. That's our closed Facebook group. Go to H2H In-Laws and Outlaws on Facebook. We'll pop up, answer a few questions.
Only 3. I got 3 this week. Last
you're
week I
in.
said it, yeah.
3 questions, you're in. That's all you need.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting case. It's a little long. There was so much information. I actually went through and edited my script and took some stuff out.
Wow.
Because there is so much to this guy.
He sounds like Catch Me If You Can.
Well, I was just getting ready to say 2 of my favorite movies are Catch Me If You Can and The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah.
And this case is about a guy who's kind of a cross between Frank Abagnale Jr. and Tom Ripley.
Yeah.
And the story is so incredible. And it's all true. You know, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yep.
This story is like textbook. Before we get started, I want to thank some sources: the Los Angeles Times, the Ventura County Star, the Record Searchlight, Wikipedia, CBS 48 Hours, Beyond Crime, and The Man in the Rockefeller Suit by Mark Seal.
Wow.
I did read it. I will post a link to it and all the other sources in the show notes.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter is born on February 21st, 1961, to Simon and Ermengarde in Siegsdorf, Bavaria, West Germany.
I'm just impressed you got all that pronunciation. We can stop right here.
Herr Meyerwieser would be so proud of me. That was my German teacher in high school. He grows up in Bergen, a small town of about 5,000 people. His father is a house painter, and his dad's also an artist.
Okay.
And Christian's parents thought he was the bee's knees, and they loved that he was a creative child. And until he is 12, he's also an only child. And he sort of acts like he's an only child for the rest of his life, even though he's got a younger brother, Alexander.
Got it.
In Christian's head, it was always about Christian. Now, while he's growing up in this small town in Germany, Christian watches a lot of television.
Okay.
He was hooked. He also liked to emulate some of the people he saw on TV. And as he gets older, he likes looking cool, or what he considers to be cool.
All right.
He wore sunglasses even when he was inside. He wore his hair long, and his parents thought he was a little bit strange, but they were okay with him being so creative.
Sure.
He was really smart. He read a lot. I was one of those kids who was like checking out 6 books at a time at the library. I was the nerd reading all the time. Go figure, I end up being a writer.
I was just a weird kid.
You were listening to all the music, honey. I already know this. We can play Name That Tune all day long and Rob wins. So, but he knew all of the classic literature, and The Great Gatsby was his favorite. And Christian also spoke perfect English.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
But he was not a great student. So even though he was really intelligent, not good grades, but I would surmise it meant that he was a little bit bored in school, which is a bad combination if the person is somewhat devious. And Christian is.
Okay.
So again, he's a little bit like Frank Abagnale Jr. He couldn't wait to graduate high school and leave Germany. Quote, "Everything here in Bavaria is shit. If you want a better life, you have to go to America," end quote.
So what was his point?
He wanted out.
Yeah, exactly.
He wanted out. Well, he'd been watching all this American television.
Sure.
And he's like, I want out.
Yeah.
And that was his plan. And he could not wait to get to the United States. Now, as a kid, he would pretend to be other people when he was adults, and he would get away with it. You know, the Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale Jr. stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
When he's 16, he meets American tourists in Germany. Their names are Elmer and Jean Kellen. Elmer is a dentist, and he and his wife are on vacation. Christian tells them both that he is going to America to study film. He loves Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, wow.
He also shows them around his town because, remember, his English is perfect.
Sure.
And when they ask where they should stay for the night, he says, "You should come home with me." And this couple has said that it felt a little bit weird, but they did follow him home. They met his family, they ate dinner, and then they spent the night.
Would you do that?
I would not do that.
No, me.
I would not do that, but it's the 70s. It is the 70s. It was a different time.
Yeah, people were, they're still hitchhiking.
Yeah, they're hitchhiking and picking up people. And, you know, they're just sort of everyone love everybody, live together. It's not a big deal.
Everybody love everybody.
Everybody love everybody.
My favorite movie.
But before the Kellens leave the next morning, Christian gets their home address where they live in Loma Linda, California. And then he says goodbye to Elmer and Jean. And the Kellens are like, they're thinking, we're never going to see this kid again. But they say, if you're ever in California, look us up.
Well, that was their first mistake.
That's the first of many mistakes.
Yeah.
But then one day riding on the train in Germany, Christian also meets a guy named Peter Rockefeller. Peter's a kid who lives in the United States. He's from Connecticut. These two exchange information, and Peter says, "Hey, if you ever come to the United States, you should look me up." And just like the Kellen family, he's thinking, I'll never see this kid again,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
A couple of months later, Christian is filling out his tourist visa to the United States. He's 17. He's graduated school, but he needs a sponsor for his visa. So whose name and address does he use?
No.
Elmer and Jean Kellen of Loma Linda,
Oops.
California.
Wow.
On October 16th, 1978, Christian arrives in Boston, Massachusetts. And who does he call when he lands? His buddy Peter, who lives in Connecticut.
Hey, Pete, I'm here.
He stays with him for a couple of weeks, sleeping on the couch. And on October 21st, 1978, he enrolls at Berlin, Connecticut High School.
Okay.
Now, he doesn't really have a sponsor family because he's not there as an exchange student, and he's actually already finished high school. But the school doesn't seem to care or check his school records in the motherland.
Yeah.
And Christian enrolls as a senior at Burlington High School, knowing that if he says he's a student, someone will take him in and he'll have room and board.
Okay.
Christian put an ad out, quote, "Exchange student looking for room and board," and a woman named Gwen Savio, who's the librarian at the Berlin High School, had hosted an exchange student before. And she's got a family. She's got a 15-year-old son. She's got 3 other children, and she takes him in.
Yeah. Well, once again, it's a 7. I was an exchange student when I was in high school in South America and lived with a family down there. And
Yeah, exactly. Christian slept in the living room and was actually the 5th child living in this house. So, I mean, they took him in when they really didn't have the room.
Right.
So they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. But he did go to school, but mostly he watched TV. And he loved watching, wait for it, Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island.
Oh, that's great.
And he began speaking English, not just in his English with a little bit of a German accent, which he still had, but speaking English with a mid-Atlantic blue blood lockjaw tone, sounding like Thurston Howell III. Oh, lovey. Oh, my goodness.
I was going to say maybe it was Bob Denver.
My name is Christian. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, geez.
That's what he's doing.
Wow.
That was a horrible Thurston Howell III. I'm sorry. I just loved how it was described. Everywhere I looked up how to describe it, lockjaw was part of the description. Lockjaw. Just don't talk. Lovey. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So Christian's got this wild imagination, and it was one of the things, remember, his creative father loved about him. But Christian would make up stories about his family, who they were, what they had, how much money they had. And when Christian doesn't like being told what to do around the Savio house, he would insult them and say things like, quote, "My father wouldn't let me speak to peasants," end quote. He would also say, quote, "I would never live like this."
Oh, wow.
And, quote, "I don't like Italians or Italian food. They're dirty."
Oh, jeez.
End quote. The Savios are Italian, by the way.
It's kind of like in The Incredible Burt Wonderstone when he goes and stays overnight at the girl's apartment. And he says, "What is this?" And she says, "It's pan-fried tilapia." He goes, I imagine this is what prisoners eat.
Yeah, peasants, the peasants. And then he puts the plates out in front of her apartment and claps his hand. "Garçon.
Andre.
Pick up." Yeah, that's what he's doing. So he's seeing these people, Thurston Howell III, and that's what he's doing. He emulates this.
Wow.
So then he changes his name from Christian Gerhartsreiter to Chris Gerhardt.
Okay.
And then to Christopher Kenneth Gerhardt.
Okay.
Now, the oldest Savio kid, his name is Edward, said that when he talked, he sounded like a cross between Mr. Howell and John Wayne, which really cracked me up, so I had to put it in there.
Wow.
Yeah. And the family's a little bit upset with him because he's being such an ass.
Yeah.
An ass. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when the youngest Savio child, she was a little girl, she came home from school while Christian was watching TV, and he wouldn't let her in the house. She knocked on the door. She rang the doorbell. He left her out in the cold for hours while he's watching TV.
Jeez.
And this is the point where the Savio family says, "You've worn out your welcome. You got to find another place to live.
Time to go."
And he said to them, quote, "I'm ready for something better anyway," end quote.
Gee whiz.
Now, during all this time, Christian is milking his own family for money. They're sending him $250 a month for living expenses, but he's living off the families he's staying with.
Yeah, you can bankroll that stuff.
And the money he gets, he's buying himself clothes. Preppy clothes, navy blazers, Lacoste shirts, with the alligator, khakis, ascots. Does this sound familiar? It's what Mr. Howell would wear on Gilligan's Island. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
There was even a story where he showed up at school in a suit, and everyone was like, this is the 70s, and everyone was like, what is wrong with the German exchange student?
He should have picked Gilligan. It's a lot cheaper.
Now, he's going to go on and live with about 3 other families in their homes in Connecticut, and he gets kicked out of all of them. But then finally, he's accepted as a foreign student at the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, which is an extension of the Madison campus.
Okay.
His major, political science. And on August of 1979, Christian moved into a dorm, Baldwin Hall. He's very secretive about his family to the other kids. He's wearing these clothes. He's acting like he's wealthy, like he's a somebody. He's putting on airs, as we would say in the South.
Right.
By January of 1980, he's left that campus and transferred to the Milwaukee campus. And now he's a communications major. And he uses a new name, Kenneth Gerhardt.
Okay.
So a pattern is forming. He likes to change his name and take on new identities. It's almost like whenever he feels like he needs to morph into something new, he sheds the old life like the skin of a snake.
Right.
And it's in his head. He's just reinventing himself.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was about ready to say. He's just going to reinvent himself every time.
And he's going to do it a lot. One of the things that Christian does every time he gets a new name is that he goes to a new place and he joins a church. He gets involved with a church.
Okay.
Meet Amy Janine Jersild. Christian meets Amy through her younger sister, Elaine, at the church group at the University of Wisconsin. Amy is 22 years old. Christian's only 20, and Christian wants to get married.
Wow.
Not because he loves Amy, but because he wants...
His green card.
He wants a green card.
Yeah.
He's going to work the system.
Yep.
He tells Amy that he needs to get married or he'll be sent back to Germany where he will have to become a soldier for the German army on the front lines against Russia in the Cold War.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a Cold War for a reason, Christian.
Yeah. I don't remember a lot of German soldiers on the front line.
Yes, but it is the 70s, early 80s, and, you know, there was a lot of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union and other countries in the Soviet Union.
Right.
But this marriage is very transactional, and she does, in fact, marry him in Dane County in Madison, Wisconsin. They say I do on February 20th, 1981. And then on April 7th, 1981, Amy signs his papers to get him his green card. And I actually read where he wrote down his name for her, his real name, spelling it out, Gerhartsreiter, so that when she signed the green card papers, she would not misspell it. Can't have anything that looks hinky, like they're just getting married so he could have a green card, right?
Exactly.
So after she signs the paper, Amy will never see Christian again. And 12 years will pass before she actually gets a divorce and marries a man that she really loves.
Wow.
And it's not just Amy that won't see him again. No one in Milwaukee or Madison will ever see him again. He leaves for Los Angeles, giving a new address of the home of Dr. Kellen and his wife, Jean, in Loma Linda, California.
How many years has it been since he's seen them?
2?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe 2, because he just does a year of school and then goes off to college and gets married. A ton of stuff happens in a very short period of time.
And they don't expect to ever see him again.
Well, he's like a bad penny.
Yeah.
He just keeps turning up.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was, I mean, if I were them, I would be like, why did we ever tell this kid? Look us up. Because he just keeps coming back. But they are the salt of the earth, this couple. Very sweet.
Yeah.
But this is his MO. He uses people. This is the theme for this story. And not just the murder, but how he preys on the kindness of others. So he heads to California. He's going to Los Angeles. So why Los Angeles? Well, remember, he loves television and he loves Alfred Hitchcock. He's a smart guy and he wants to work in Hollywood. He's been driving this old beat-up car that he bought, probably with his dad's money, because he hasn't really worked. But on his drive west, he tried on lots of new names. In Las Vegas, he pretended to be Dr. Christopher Ryder, a cardiologist.
Okay.
He meets a fellow cardiologist who loaned him $1,500, and he quickly leaves Las Vegas. So it's hi, this is what do you do? I'm a cardiologist. Really? I'm a cardiologist too.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence.
Can you loan me
$1,500?
Gee whiz.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a cardiologist, why are you asking for a loan?
Yeah, I'm sure he'd weaved some tale.
Yeah.
He was very good at making up stories.
I lost my wallet. It was here somewhere.
Somewhere. But if you're keeping track at home, folks, we're on name number 3. Christian Gerhartsreiter, Chris Gerhardt, and Kenneth Gerhardt, using the first and middle names he chose for himself. and now Dr. Christopher Reiter. Now, when Christian arrives in California, he goes to Loma Linda and to the home of the Kellens, and while he's staying with them, he tells them that he needs a better name. This is Hollywood, and he needs a better name.
Yeah, it's pretty common, especially if you're an actor. You have to choose a name that hasn't been registered with AFTRA and SAG.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you really think Christian Gerhartsreiter was?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But this is when he remembers his favorite teacher in Berlin, Connecticut, a biology teacher who was blonde and beautiful. He had a huge crush on her, and her name was Joan Chichester. And Christian takes a new name. This time he's chosen Christopher Mountbatten Chichester.
There's a lot of names out there you could copy. I'm not sure that Chichester would probably be the one that I would choose.
But don't forget, Mountbatten, that's going to come into play in a second.
Okay.
May 26, 1981, Christian moves not to Los Angeles, but to the small town just 12 miles east called San Marino. Okay. It's a place that's filled with money and society. So February 1981, he signed the papers for his green card. Then he goes to Las Vegas, pretends to be a cardiologist. And by May 26, 1981, he's moved in full-time near L.A. It's moving quick.
Yeah.
He's still driving the same beat-up car, but suddenly he's showing up at all the clubs in this exclusive community of San Marino. He shows up at city council meetings. And when people start to ask questions, he tells them his name is Christopher Mountbatten Chichester, the 13th Baronet. He speaks in a cross between Thurston Howell accent and a little bit of an English accent thrown in. So think Thurston Howell and Prince Charles.
There you go.
Who's now King Charles.
Wow.
But it's still yes, my name is Christian Mountbatten Chichester.
And then he threw the ball at him and then
and then he stepped on the ball. Yeah.
What movie is that from?
Trading Places.
There you go.
He tells everyone that he's a graduate of Yale. He joins the Rotary. He starts getting invitations to parties, and he joins the Church of Our Savior, which is the oldest church in the area. Now, at church, he meets a lot of kindly widows, women with no husbands, but lots of money. And Christian knows everything about everything. He's a smooth talker.
Sure.
And of course, they're calling him Christopher and not Christian. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to continue to call him Christian until we get to a certain point, just so we don't get confused.
Okay.
But he has this community so bamboozled that in 1982, the local newspaper writes a story about how their community now had a descendant of Sir Francis Chichester, who Elizabeth II herself had knighted, living amongst them.
Oh, man, this guy's good.
He even tells them at one point that his family owned a chapel in Europe, in England, and that he wanted to have it sent over.
Wow.
Really? Like, really?
Wow.
Yeah. He's wearing the khaki pants. He's wearing the navy blazer with a crest on it. He wears his Yale baseball hat sometimes, but he still has no money, and he's still driving a jalopy. He's driving this beat-up car. So things don't add up, but for some reason, he's able to just pull the wool over everybody's eyes.
I mean, isn't anybody questioning why he's driving a piece of junk?
He always had an excuse for stuff.
Okay.
Just wait. The excuses get so good.
All right.
But the women from the church, the widows, they take pity on him, and they're driving him around town. So he's charming them. He's using his fake British accent. He tells them he studied at USC, or insinuated that he was a teacher's assistant for Arthur Knight, who's a famous teacher. He's a famous author and a film critic. This is the guy whose pupil was actually George Lucas.
Oh, wow.
He's that guy.
Wow.
He's teaching the men and women that we watch their movies today.
Wow.
That's who's teaching them. And he's saying that he was his TA.
Jeez. Well, at least he's picking prominent people.
Oh, he always picks prominent. I mean, if you're going to go big, go big.
Yeah, go big or go home.
And Christian liked to use props to go along with all these stories. He carried with him business cards that said he was Christopher Chichester, the 13th Baronet, with a family crest. And he would walk around with a script under his arm like he was getting ready to produce a movie. Yeah.
He was playing a part is what he was doing.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. So many parts.
Yeah.
He would audit classes at USC, but he wasn't a student. He loved Alfred Hitchcock, and he loved the idea of the perfect crime.
Uh-oh.
He acts as if he's very wealthy, and because he's so wealthy, it only makes sense that he's a little bit eccentric. You know, people with money are a little weird sometimes.
Sure.
But the funny thing is, he always showed up to people's homes at meal times, and nobody really knows where he lives. But he would show up around dinner time or lunchtime and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was interrupting dinner," or "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I was interrupting dinner."
But while I'm here.
And of course, they're like, "Please come in and eat with us." And there are people from San Marino who have said now that when he would come eat, he acted like he hadn't eaten in weeks because he probably hadn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Christian is going to Bible study, hanging out with the old money widows, and this is where he meets, through friends, a woman named Ruth Dee Sohus.
Okay.
Dee lived at 1920 Lorraine Road. It was a home that she lived in with her parents since she was a small child. This is her family home. Dee was a debutante and a 3-time divorcee. She liked to drink. And her last husband, Bob, and Dee adopted a son named John. But apparently after Dee slugged Bob in the face one night, he moved out.
Yeah.
And Dee raised John on her own.
Okay.
And Dee loved her only son. He was a little bit of a mama's boy for sure.
Okay.
Now, after Christian meets Dee, she asked him if he would like to move into the carriage house that sat behind her home. It was a place that her mother had lived in before going to the nursing home.
All right.
And Dee lives in this house by herself. She's very taken with Christian, and she loves hearing about all of his stories and all the famous people he knows and how he's royalty in Britain. She's very taken with him. And here's the thing. She cannot rent the house out. So it's a perfect situation for Christian because he's got no money.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a little secret in town that he lives there in that carriage house.
Gotcha.
Like, people don't know where he lives. He tells everyone a little bit of a different story. But when Christian moves in, he doesn't have that much stuff. And what he does have, he's carrying around an old shopping bags from the University of Wisconsin and USC.
Okay.
That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh. Dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm. It's also important to know that Dee liked her cocktail hour, and sometimes that hour started pretty early.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, she liked to stay in her pajamas a lot, and she's drinking and smoking and walking around the house in her robe. A lot. But from 1982 to 1985, for almost 3 whole years, Christian will live in this guest house behind Dee while regaling the people in town of his royal family, his education, and his ideas.
And nobody's catching on.
Nobody's catching on.
Wow.
When 1982 rolls around, John Sohus, Dee's adopted son, he's 25 years old. John Robert Sohus is born on December 20th, 1957. He's adopted when he's 6 months old. His biological mother was a teenage girl who gave him up.
Okay.
John loves computers. He's a Trekkie. He's a Star Trek fanatic.
Okay.
And I read in some of the sources that he was considered a nerd. But I got to say, I love Star Trek. So if that makes me a nerd, so be it.
Yep.
I would consider myself a Trekkie.
I love Star Trek too.
But John's a small guy. He's 5'5". He's my size.
Okay.
And John loves playing Dungeons and Dragons.
There you go.
And this is where he meets and falls in love with Linda Christine Mayfield. Linda works at a sci-fi comic book cosplay kind of store. Linda is not a small girl. She's over 6 feet tall and weighs over 200 pounds.
Okay.
And she has strawberry blonde hair. So John is 5'5", maybe 130. She's 6 feet, over 200 pounds. It is a match made in heaven.
Opposites attract.
Exactly. They decide they want to get married, but money is tight. So they move in with Dee Dee at her home on 1920 Lorraine Road. And already there and living in the carriage house is Christian, a.k.a. Christopher Mountbatten Chichester the 13th Baronet. I know it's a lot to say, but I like getting it in there.
Can we put Thurston Howell in there somewhere?
He's living with Thurston Howell. Yeah. It's important to note that they moved in with Dee Dee and not Linda's family because Linda and her mother haven't spoken in years. So these two can't live in the carriage house by themselves, have a little privacy. I mean, think about it. If you're moving home and there's a carriage house behind your mom's house, isn't that where you would want to live?
Yeah, exactly.
But they can't have it because Christian's there.
Sure.
So they're living in the house with Dee Dee. And even when John and Linda get married, they're still living in the house with Dee Dee because they're trying to save some money. And these four would see each other a lot around the house. Linda would tell her friends that she thought Christopher was weird, which is such an understatement.
I was about to say. So what else is new?
Yeah. By 1985, they start telling Dee Dee that they weren't buying the Thurston Howell, Prince Charles, fake-ass Baronet Chichester BS anymore. And they wanted him out. Yeah. They're telling her he's lying. He's lying to you about everything.
Right.
Finally, the voice of reason, right?
Yeah. Somebody's finally getting it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, these two are trying to have their own life. John gets a new Nissan truck, and the two of them had plans to go to a science fiction convention, and they planned on driving in the new truck there in March.
Okay.
Now, Dee Dee's health is deteriorating. She's an alcoholic. She's showing signs of dementia. But this house is worth a lot of money, and the antiques inside are also worth a lot of money.
Sure.
Yeah. And Christopher, who was a swindler, he's swindling people in town out of money for a while. He puts into motion this plan to manipulate Dee Dee out of her money. The problem was John was her sole heir, and Christian wanted to be her sole heir.
Yeah.
Okay, before I say this next part, I just want to qualify it. This is what authorities and FBI believe happened, okay?
All right.
February 1985, Christian convinces John and Linda that he had gotten them both top secret jobs in New York.
Okay.
They were to fly east separately, John before Linda. It's not known exactly what happened, but before John leaves, Christian somehow jumps him, hits him over the head with something, because he's going to die of blunt force trauma to the head.
Wow.
Then he stabs him 6 times before dismembering the body and placing them into bags, placing the body parts into bags.
Whoa.
Including plastic bags from inside the carriage house.
Gee whiz.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Then he takes Linda with him on a little trip. And then most likely he kills her, burying her body in the desert somewhere.
Wow.
Now, to friends and family of John and Linda Sohus, they've suddenly disappeared. And at first, Dee Dee and John and Linda's friends aren't that worried because, in fact, Linda put her cats into a cat hotel and paid in advance for them to be there for 2 weeks.
Okay.
These are her beloved kitties.
Sure.
And Linda told several people that she and John were going off on a secret government mission to New York City.
Oh, okay.
But on February 8th, 1985, Linda is supposed to be back at work, and she doesn't show up. And her friends become worried, and they call Dee Dee, who tells police that John and Linda had gone to Paris. And then she says they went to New York because John was offered a top secret government job, but she felt sure they'd be back because John wasn't going to miss the sci-fi convention in March, right?
Right.
Now, if you're Christian, a man who makes up existences and scenarios all the time, you you could convince people you're the 13th baronet and you're related to the Mountbattens, a British dynasty who Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip, is a part of. Yeah. That you might be the kind of person who could spin a tale of a secret government mission and convince someone that they're going to be hired.
Yeah.
Now, a month goes by and no word from John or Linda. Christian is still living in the carriage house. Finally, police show up because Linda's friends are really worried.
Of course.
And Dee Dee tells the police that they aren't missing, that she's working with a source. And she can't reveal who the source is or how she contacts them.
Wow.
Because this is all top secret.
Well, and she's starting to suffer dementia.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Highly impressionable.
Sure.
But she tells them that they're in France. And sure enough, that same day or soon after, postcards arrive that were supposed to be from France. They arrive in San Marino.
Okay.
One to the co-owner of the store where Linda worked. One to her friend, Sue Kaufman, who was the one who's been so concerned, and one to Linda's mother, which, of course, is really odd because these two have not spoken in years.
The first mistake. Yeah, the first stumble.
So today, nobody believes that the postcards actually came from Paris to San Marino. But at the time, that is what happened.
Okay.
Christian also, during this time, borrows a chainsaw from a neighbor, something he'd never done before because Christian doesn't do manual labor.
Yeah, it's beneath him.
It's beneath me to do manual labor.
I barely step on the ball.
Yes. And he also burned something in the fireplace in the carriage house that smelled so bad that the neighbors came forward saying, "You got to stop. This is putrid."
Yeah, whatever you're doing in there, quit it.
Quit it. And they said, "What are you burning?" And he tells them, "I was burning carpet." He also tries to sell an Oriental rug to somebody. He tells them all about it, rolls it up, takes it to him, unrolls it, and the person who's trying to buy it goes, that's a blood stain. And what does Christian do? He rolls the rug back up again. He's like, "Okay, never mind." Walks away.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing
Moving
to
on.
see here. Then soon after, the neighbors notice that there is a hole in Dee Dee's backyard. And when someone asks Christian about it, he tells the neighbors, "Oh, it's a plumbing problem." But there are no pipes where the hole was.
Yeah.
And it's about this time that Christian knows, or Christopher Mountbatten Chichester, the 13th baronet, he knows it's time for him to go. But before he does a couple of things. He introduces Dee Dee to John and Linda Weatherby, a couple that lived 20 minutes away in a trailer park. Now, this is a woman who is a debutante, and he's introducing her to a couple that live in a trailer park.
Okay.
These two will be the caretakers of Dee Dee after Christian leaves. And it's thought that at this time, Christian and this couple make a deal. Hold that thought.
Okay.
When Christian is leaving, he takes John's new Nissan truck and drives away. But where would he go? Well, he drives to Loma Linda, California, and the home of Dr. and Mrs. Kellen.
Oh, wow.
He just keeps coming back.
Wow.
And he pulls up in this new truck and he goes, "Look at me. I've made it in Hollywood." And these two have to be like, not this guy again. He's back. He tells them he's off to the Cannes Film Festival and he asks for some money, some pocket cash for the trip. And they give it to him, $1,500. Wow. Yeah. 5 months after John and Linda go missing, Dee Dee calls the police in San Marino because, quote, "the source has asked for John and Linda's things to be shipped to Iredale, North Carolina." It's also now that the authorities are thinking Dee Dee might have a little touch of dementia and maybe she doesn't know what's going on around her at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Christian, a.k.a. Chris, a.k.a. Kenneth, a.k.a. Dr. Christopher Ryder, a.k.a. Christopher Mountbatten Chichester the 13th, that guy, he's still wearing his khakis, his Sperry boat shoes, his Lacoste shirts, his Yale baseball hat. He also has round black glasses. He drives across the United States using the money he got from the Kellens to go to the Cannes Film Festival, which he's not going to. He drives from California to New York City. And in June of 1985, he arrives in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Okay.
His new name, Christopher C. Crowe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is he Cameron Crowe's relation?
No.
Oh, okay.
Christian, now Mr. Crowe, tells everybody he's a television producer from Los Angeles who worked on the 1980s revival of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Wow.
And it just so happened that one of the producers for the show at the time was Christopher Crowe. So it would be like someone out there saying, I'm Emmy-nominated composer Rob Podorf, who wrote music for The Ultimate Legacy. And if you watch the movie, the name comes up and he's like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, he's just stealing an identity.
Yeah.
Now, to get the ball rolling with his new life in Greenwich, he goes to...
I'm going to say either a bar or church.
He goes to church.
There you go. There you go.
Christ Church. This is a place where the Bushes and the Rockefellers talk to Jesus on Sundays.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
Okay.
It's a very old Episcopal church with a long roster of wealthy people. He joins the church, he becomes an usher. And so each Sunday he's handing out the hymnals and he's rubbing elbows with the wealthy locals. And one of the parishioners has a room for rent at 34 Rockridge Avenue. It's 74-year-old John Callahan Maddox, who lives with his wife, Gretchen.
Okay.
He also meets the church minister's son, Chris Bishop. And these two bond because Bishop is an aspiring filmmaker, and Christian, a.k.a. Christopher Crowe, is, of course, a producer.
Sure.
Now, by now, Christian is 24 years old. He's done all of this. He's only 24.
24.
Yeah, 24.
The amount of stuff that he's done, I would guess he's like 42.
Yeah, no, 24.
Wow.
He joins what's called the Cotton Club Singles Group at the church. He volunteers for the church, too, because Christopher's pretty good with computers, and he takes the church's member roster and puts it on the new computer system for them. Or I'm sure it was for himself.
Yeah, you think?
He now has the name, address, phone number of all these very wealthy people in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Wow.
And because he's so good with computers, he talks about the fact that he wants to become a bond trader.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's walking around with a script under his arm everywhere he goes. He's wearing his Yale hat, which I would think would be a little bit risky being in the Northeast.
Yeah, because you're going to run into people that have gone to Yale.
Yeah.
Wow.
He would show up at the Harbor Yacht Club always wearing monogrammed shirts, CCC, Christopher Chichester Crowe.
Jeez. Guy's got some, yeah.
He's got balls,
He's got
man.
stones.
After he's in the area for 2 years, he decides he's going to become a bond trader on Wall Street.
Okay.
In 1986, he meets a woman named Catherine at the Indian Harbor, and she gets him started. He passes the tests that he needed, and he gets a job with S.N. Phelps and Company.
All right.
Now, this job only pays $24,000 a year, and when his friends at the yacht club look at him, they're saying, Christopher, you're a Hollywood producer of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Why would you take a job making $24K?
Yeah.
And he would tell them because he wanted to try something new.
Oh, okay.
And they were like, okay, he's got money. He's eccentric. He wants to try this. Let him go.
Yeah.
But when you work for a legit company on Wall Street, you have to keep your nose clean, right?
Sure.
Christopher Chichester Crowe needed something he didn't have.
And that is?
A social security number.
Yeah.
It's a legit Wall Street company.
Sure.
I mean, you got to go by the book.
Right.
So he gives them one.
Whose is it?
You're about to find out in a little while, but he does give them a social security number.
All right.
He's with S.N. Phelps for less than a year, and he leaves in 1987 because he had an attitude problem. And here it is. It's later going to be discovered that the Social Security number he used was that of David Berkowitz, the son of Sam killer.
What?
That is the Social Security number he used.
That's the one he picked.
That's the one he picked.
Holy cow.
Again, balls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then in the summer of 1987, he takes a job with Nico Securities. This time, he's running an entire department and making $125,000 a year.
How'd he get that gig?
Because he had the other gig, I guess. And he knows people. You know, it's sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
And he's running in the right circles.
Right.
He's also added Mountbatten back into his name again. And he's name dropping.
All right.
This is where he meets a girl, Mahoko Manabe. She's a Japanese interpreter at Nico Securities. Smart, pretty, perfect target for Christian.
Yeah.
But it's soon discovered that Christian had no idea what he was doing as a bond trader. He had swagger, but he didn't know anything else. It was all a facade.
Right.
Big hat, no cattle.
Yeah, exactly.
He never sold one bond. And when October 19th, 1987, better known as Black Monday in the United States, happened, it was just another day at the office for him. He had no idea what was happening.
Sure.
Everybody else was freaking out because the Dow was dropping the farthest in one day in the history of the stock exchange.
Yeah.
But he's just like, no, doesn't care.
Yeah. On a side note, that was the week prior to that was when I bought my very first stock. And then Black Monday happened.
Timing is everything.
It really
honey.
is.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But meanwhile, Christian is spending this $125,000 he's making. He's bought expensive clothes and shoes. He ate at all the best restaurants in Manhattan. He liked throwing money around, and he was living with Mahoko.
Okay.
Now, remember when Christian drove across the country from California to Connecticut, he was in John Sohus's Nissan truck.
Yeah.
And for the past couple of years, it's been in a garage, and he didn't drive it. But he tells Chris Bishop, the minister's son, hey, I've got this pickup truck. It was a production vehicle on a movie that I made. I can't use it. I don't want it.
Oh, wow.
Would you like it? Big mistake.
Yeah.
Big, huge.
Yeah.
Chris says, yeah, of course. But when Chris takes the truck to the DMV to register it,
Hello.
there's a problem.
Hello.
Because the truck comes back to the owners, John and Linda Sohus.
Yeah.
This sounds the alarm in San Marino, California. The police department there has been sitting on a cold case of missing persons all this time. So they want to speak with this new owner to find out if they had any information on the missing couple.
Yeah.
And on November 3rd, 1988, San Marino Police Department calls Greenwich, Connecticut Police Department, and they speak with Lieutenant Dan Allen.
Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan. Or in this case, Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Dan. But it didn't take long for Allen to discover that Christopher Crowe was also Christopher Chichester, and he was no longer living in Greenwich. He was in New York City and living with his girlfriend, Mahoko. It doesn't take long for Nico Securities to catch on that Christian is a fraud, and he's fired.
Wow.
Now, after being fired for incompetence, Christian goes to Kidder, Peabody & Co., and he gets himself a 2-week tryout. He's living with Mahoko. She takes the first call from the Greenwich Police Department and Dan Allen. She passes the information along to him, and when Christian comes back from a business trip with a colleague at Kidder Peabody,
Okay.
the guys at Kidder Peabody, they get a call from the police, and they're like, what is your association with Christian? And they're like, hey, man, he's just getting a 2-week tryout with us.
Yeah.
Don't come for us.
Yeah, we
you
don't know this guy.
We're a securities company. We don't need the police here.
Yeah.
But the police stake out the building, and they're trying to talk to him. But somehow Christian gets wind that they're there waiting for him, and he calls in sick that day. And an already paranoid man became a crazy man. Christian wanted to leave New York City. He wanted to move to Europe with Mahoko. He asked her to marry him. She says yes. He has her dye his hair and his eyebrows. He shreds his mail. He holes up in their apartment. Then Christian and she moved to another apartment. He grew a beard.
Oh, wow.
Christopher Crowe laid very low for 3 years.
And she didn't question why he wanted to do all this?
She didn't question it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've seen an interview with her, and when she takes the witness stand later on in this case, she just basically says, I don't like talking about this. I'm very embarrassed about this. But I'm sure he made her feel like she was loved.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be more than just this. There's an emotional connection.
Sure.
But he lays low for 3 years, and he's living off of her. So from December 6, 1988 to sometime in 1992, Christian wasn't seen by anyone from any of his former lives. And people said, oh, he moved to Tokyo or he went to Delhi. And what he was really doing was watching TV and fiddling around on his computer. Now, during this time, he and Mahoko were out to dinner at a nice place in Manhattan. They couldn't get in. They couldn't get a reservation. And Christian, just off the cuff, said to them, to the maitre d', my name is Rockefeller, Clark Rockefeller. Oh. And suddenly, these two have a table.
Wow.
It's also about this time that Mahoko decides she's had enough of Christian.
Yeah.
She'd been doing really well at work, and she was making more and more money. And when he would not leave, she broke up with him, and she just moved herself out and left him there.
She yeeted on out of there.
Yep. Then, this is the crazy part to me. There are 4 years where no one seems to know where Christian actually was.
Really?
But in 1992, he emerged again and again in a church, St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, where many New York leaders, politicians, and most of society attended Sunday services.
Okay.
Christian is now 37, and when he goes to church, because you know he's going to church, he introduces himself as James Frederick Mills Clark Rockefeller.
Whoa, really?
But you can call me Clark.
Oh, man. That's a beaut, Clark.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
And when asked if he was one of the cousins, he replied, no, I'm one of the cousins' cousins.
Yeah. Okay.
And the parishioners there, they think, well, that's just his way of saying, don't make a big deal out of this, you know.
Yeah.
He insinuates to people that he's part of the Percy Rockefeller branch of the Klan.
Wow.
And not the John D. Rockefeller group. So not ultra rich, but rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
He tells people that he went to Yale at the age of 14. So he's expanded on that story a little bit.
Wow.
That he had a J-boat from his grandparents, which is a classic sailing yacht from the 1930s. And he added to this conversation that he just had utter disdain for the nouveau riche who used J-boats for parties. It was a racing boat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And according to the book, The Man in the Rockefeller Suit, this is kind of part of his MO, always being in a snit.
Okay.
He was also ultra paranoid about security. You're going to love this.
Okay.
He carried around this radio device acting like it was connected to Rockefeller's security offices.
Oh, man.
It was so he wouldn't be kidnapped.
Oh, okay. All right.
He played upon the fact that he was extremely private with his life, which tracked with his Rockefeller name.
Sure.
He told people that he was working on solving third world debt, particularly in the Pacific Rim.
Okay.
He told them that his parents died when he was 16 and he basically raised himself. But it's through this church that Christian, now Clark, meets in the spring of 1993 Sandra Lynn Boss. She's a bright young Harvard Business School student. She's 26. Christian is 32.
Mm-hmm.
He was a friend of Sandra's sister at church. Now, these two meet at a party where you have to dress up as a character from the board game Clue.
Okay.
Sandra went dressed as Miss Scarlet. And when Sandra returns to Harvard and Boston, Christian calls her and says, I want to see you again. He tells her his father's name is George Percy Rockefeller. His mother is Mary Roberts. She thinks he's really smart, and he is, and she is brilliant. She falls fast and hard for Clark, Christian. In the spring of 1994, he proposes. She accepts his odd and eccentric behavior because he was smart, and he was a Rockefeller.
Right.
Meanwhile, back in California, in San Marino, Dee Dee has sold the house at 1920 Lorraine, and new owners have decided to put in a swimming pool.
Okay.
When they start digging, the bulldozer hits bones.
Oh, my gosh.
There was a grave site directly behind the guest house where Christopher Chichester had once lived. Wow.
Bummer, dude.
The body had been cut into 3 sections and placed in fiberglass containers. Arms, legs, and torso were wrapped in saran wrap. The hands were covered in bags, and the feet and head were covered in plastic bags. Plastic bags from the University of Wisconsin and USC. The bags he used to move into that place.
Christopher.
Everything was decomposed. They didn't really know what they had on their hands. And the TV show Unsolved Mysteries even recreated the scene and posted a picture of Christopher Chichester calling him a person of interest. But nobody called in with a tip. Nobody called in with a tip.
Wow.
And the whole case goes cold. Back in New York City, Christian, or Clark, is telling his new bride-to-be that because of a lawsuit, he didn't have any money, but he would be coming into his money soon. And then on October 14th, 1995, in the Quaker Meeting House on the island of Nantucket, 7 guests witnessed the wedding of Sandra and Clark Rockefeller.
Wow.
So why the Quaker church, you might ask? Well, the parishioners of the St. Thomas on Fifth Avenue were pressuring him for a donation. And in a snit, remember, he likes to get in a snit.
Yeah.
In a snit, he decides they should do the Quaker wedding because it kept his name and personal information out of public record, which meant they weren't legally married in the eyes of the state of New York or Massachusetts.
Wow.
Meanwhile, back in California again, police have taken up the carpeting in the old carriage house and found 3 pools of blood on the floor under the carpet.
Oh, wow.
They're using luminol, and it lit up like the 4th of July.
Like a Christmas tree.
Also, they're wondering, okay, this body has to be John, but where's Linda? Because they both disappeared.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, John was adopted, so they can't do a DNA match to his mom.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
But of course, they're thinking, this is Dee Dee's son, John.
Right.
After Sandra and Clark or Christian get married, Sandra takes a job with McKinsey, and she is making great money. Her husband is doing nothing. She is the breadwinner. 3 years into the marriage, it's pretty evident that these two are in trouble. They don't seem very happy together, according to their friends. But Sandra is doing great at work and making even more money.
Okay.
He's saying that his money is still tied up. And then in 2001, Sandra gives birth to their daughter, Ray Starrow Rockefeller. And they move to Boston for her work, where they buy a $2.7 million townhome in Beacon Hill.
Wow.
They also have a second home in New Hampshire. Christian joins Boston's Algonquin Club, which is a private social club founded in 1886. It's a club for the socially elite.
Okay.
He becomes a stay-at-home dad while Sandra goes off to work. And by now, she's making over $2 million a year at her job.
Wow.
So Clark, Christian, he's finally reached Mecca. He doesn't have to worry about money, and he spends his days with someone who doesn't care what his name is, because to her, he's just dad.
Right.
It's perfect. And he loves their daughter very much. But 5 years later, everything starts to unravel. He's controlling and manipulating. His inheritance is never available to him. His family's estate is wrapped up in a legal battle. It's just the same broken record.
Yeah.
And Christian can only hold on to this con for so long. And in August of 2007, Sandra, who's a smart lady, hires a private investigator to find out who the hell her husband really is.
Who did I marry?
Who is he?
Yeah.
And what she discovers is that he isn't Clark Rockefeller. There is no Clark Rockefeller.
Yeah.
And the man has materialized out of thin air because past 1994, her husband is a ghost.
Didn't exist.
Did not exist.
Wow. How would you like to find that out?
Oh, and you have a child with him.
Yeah.
She confronts him and tells him, this is what I found. You're not a real person. And he tells her, what do you think he says?
At this point, I have no idea.
You're crazy. You're crazy. Woman, you're crazy. Sandra files for divorce, and she wants full custody of their child, Ray.
Yeah.
She even takes a job in London. I mean, she can't get far enough away from Christian or Clark.
Right.
She does settle with him, and she gives him a ton of money in this divorce, $800,000.
Wow.
And the arrangement they have is that Clark gets 3 supervised visits a year in the States, and they're supervised because during the divorce proceedings, she proves that he's not who he says he is, but he refuses to give his real name to the judge.
Really?
He's not going there, not going to give it.
Well, couldn't they get him on contempt?
No, they're like, fine, you don't get to see your daughter.
Okay.
Because what he was suing for was, joint custody. Sure. So after he loses the custody battle and Sandra and Ray move to London, he tells everybody that he's going to do whatever it takes to get his daughter back. Because remember, this little girl is the only person who loves him unconditionally.
Sure.
Not for what his name is, because he's dad.
Right.
Now, while Ray is overseas, Christian comes up with a plan. He takes some of the $800,000 he gets and he buys a home in Baltimore. And now he's changed his name from Rockefeller to Chip Smith.
Oh, it doesn't get any better than that.
And I just thought, Chip Smith, you went from Clark Rockefeller, well, all those other names in between, to just Chip Smith. Yeah. He decides he's going to buy a catamaran and he's going to take Ray around the world with him where nobody can find them.
Wow.
July 27th, 2008, Christian is meeting with the court-appointed social worker to see Ray. He sets up a car to pick them up, a black SUV. The driver has no idea what's going on. He's been driving Christian around, or Chip, because he doesn't have a driver's license. So Christian pays this driver $2,500 in cash to drive that day. He doesn't really tell him what's going on.
Okay.
But while Ray and her father are walking on Marlborough Street with the court-appointed social worker right behind, this black SUV pulls up. Christian tackles the social worker to the ground. He grabs his daughter, puts her in the SUV, and away they go. Wow. Yeah. Then he arranges to meet Eileen Ang. She's a friend of his. She's going to drive him to Baltimore, from Boston to Baltimore. Okay. But as soon as he gets in her car, Christian turns off her cell phone and will not let her turn it back on. It's a 7-hour drive to Baltimore.
Oh, wow. And she didn't question why he wanted to...
She didn't question it.
Okay.
Yeah. He turns it off. He says people are following him. He does say people are following him. But he's completely paranoid, right?
Right.
It's a 7-hour drive, but Christian is planning on leaving in his boat with his daughter out of the harbor in Baltimore. He's told everyone in Baltimore that his daughter's name is Muffy. Chip and Muffy Smith.
My name is Chip, and this is my daughter, Muffy.
But what happens when you kidnap a child? An Amber Alert goes out, which is why he didn't want her phone turned on. And the FBI's been contacted that a Rockefeller kidnapped his child, to which the Rockefellers come out and say, he is not part of our family, but it is coast to coast. A Rockefeller has kidnapped his child.
Gee whiz.
But because he was in a snit while he was looking for a home in Baltimore, his real estate agent remembered him well. She remembered his name. She tells the authorities, that's Chip Smith. But even better than that, a friend in Baltimore had been with Christian the night before he kidnaps Ray. He calls the FBI and says, we had a glass of wine and I haven't washed that glass. So they dust it for prints.
Wow.
And it comes back as Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter, 47-year-old German immigrant who came to the United States in 1978. They have his fingerprints because of ICE.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And it's not that he was fingerprinted by ICE, but all of his ICE papers had matching fingerprints all over the cards. And because this is front page news everywhere, people start coming out of the woodwork. Yeah. Ed Savio, the 15-year-old he lived with when he first came to the United States, the very beginning, Berlin, Connecticut. He calls the FBI after seeing this photo and says, yeah, that's Christian Gerhartsreiter.
Wow.
For 6 days, the FBI is looking for Christian and Ray. And his friend Ang, who dropped him off at the marina, drops him off, turns on her phone immediately, and realizes what's just happened. She gets a phone call from a friend. Didn't you just drive this guy? And she was like, yeah. And they're like, he kidnapped that girl. So she immediately calls the FBI.
Right.
Sandra, Ray's mom, Christian's ex-wife, she makes a public plea to Christian, like on all the TV stations, for him to turn himself in. She calls the authorities and tells them, I knew this was going to happen. But they're saying to her, look, we know he's Chip Smith. We know where he's bought a house in Baltimore. Right. So here's what the FBI does. They call the marina where his boat is parked, and they have them contact Christian, or Chip as he's known, and they say, tell him his boat is taking on water.
Good. Smart.
And on August 2nd, 2008, Christian hustles down to the marina, and waiting for him are plainclothes FBI agents who say, quote, what are you doing, Clark?
Oh, wow.
End quote. And he turns around and looks at them. He acknowledges that they've called him Clark. And he says, quote, I was going to get a turkey sandwich, end quote.
Okay.
I mean, really? Really? That was what he had to say?
Where did the turkey sandwich come
I was going to get a turkey sandwich.
Wow. Okay.
They arrest him and they find little Ray at home unharmed.
Good.
On August 15th, 2008, the FBI and Massachusetts State Police and Boston Police tell the public that Clark Rockefeller is Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter. He's charged with a myriad of things, including kidnapping, and bail is set at $50 million.
Wow.
And then that is revoked by a judge, and he says, nope, we're holding him without bail.
There you go.
We don't want anybody he can bamboozle to come up with this money.
Right, exactly.
On February 13th, 2009, his attorney tells the court he's going to use an insanity plea. During the trial conducted in Boston in mid-2009, Gerhartsreiter's defense team told jurors that he believed his daughter had communicated with him telepathically from London, where she and her mother moved after the divorce, begging him to rescue her. Oh, wow. Two expert witnesses for the defense testified that they have diagnosed Christian with delusional disorder, and a narcissistic personality disorder, to which, everyone's probably going, we've known this for a really long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Christian said that his father had been emotionally abusive to him during his childhood. Don't think that was true. His parents thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Right. Dr. James Chu, a psychiatrist for the prosecution, said that Christian exaggerated his symptoms of mental illness and was capable of knowing right from wrong. They also point out to the jury that Christian meticulously planned the details of the kidnapping of his daughter, Ray. Mm-hmm. Christian did not take the stand. Closing arguments ended on June 8th, 2009, and on June 12th, the jury convicted Christian Gerhartsreiter of kidnapping of his daughter, as well as 1 count of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for ordering his getaway driver to pull away even while his daughter's social worker was hanging on to the vehicle.
Oh, my gosh.
They dragged him.
Wow.
I forgot. I left that part out. They did drag him. He was going after that child, held onto the car, and they dragged him. He was acquitted of a second assault charge, as well as for giving a false name to police. The judge sentenced him to 2 to 5 years in state prison on the kidnapping count and a concurrent 2 to 3 years on the assault charge.
Okay.
But then, while all of this is happening in San Marino, they're gathering their own evidence.
Yeah, I was about ready to ask about that.
Yes, and they're ready to charge Christian with murder. A grand jury convened in the spring of 2009. They're going to charge him with the murder of John and Linda Sohus. Now, during the kidnapping trial, they would not allow anything about the murder charges in California to be presented. Mm-hmm. They left all of that out.
Okay.
On March 15th, 2011, Los Angeles County prosecutors charged Christian with the murder of Jonathan Sohus. The murder trial was held in March and April of 2013. Almost all of the evidence is circumstantial.
Sure, yeah.
All of it is really circumstantial. Right. John and Linda had only been married for a little bit over a year when they disappeared. They left no digital trail, no credit cards, no utility bills, no driver's license anyplace else. They acted to their friends like they were coming back. They left behind all their cherished belongings and her cats and John's new truck. And the folks in San Marino talked about Christopher Chichester, the 13th baronet, how he was acting more strangely than usual, that he burned something that smelled putrid, that he had dug this hole in the backyard, that he had borrowed a chainsaw. But more than anything, the bags on the body that had been during the time that he was actually at the University of Wisconsin and USC.
Right.
So they went back and said, okay, here are the bags to the universities. And they were like, yeah, that bag's from 1980. Oh. Yeah, that bag's from this year.
Wow.
And it coincided to when Christian was there.
Couldn't they find any fingerprints on the bags?
I don't think that there were fingerprints. Yeah.
Okay.
And not to mention, his girlfriend in New York City tells the jury how he eluded the police when they came asking about John's truck and how he changed his appearance. Yeah. Christian also said the couple went to Paris. Remember the postcards? Yeah. But the two had never left the United States. There was nothing that showed that they left the United States. The defense team said that Linda killed John and went into hiding. But when it was all said and done, Christian Gerhartsreiter was convicted of first-degree murder on April 10th, 2013.
Right.
The verdict included an enhancement for use of a deadly weapon to bludgeon John to death. Evidence in the case was completely circumstantial, but jurors were most swayed by those 2 plastic book bags and the fact that he drove away and kept John's truck. On August 15th, 2013, Christian was given the maximum sentence of 27 years to life, with credit for 1 year served after finishing his sentence in Massachusetts. After he was convicted, Christian fired his lawyers and represented himself during the sentencing phase. Of course he did.
Yeah.
He maintained his innocence during the sentencing hearing and said, quote, "I want to assert my innocence, that I firmly believe that the victim's wife killed the victim, but be that as it may, once again, I did not commit the crime of which I stand accused," end quote. His sentence was reduced on appeal in 2015 to 26 years to life with good time credits. He will be eligible for parole in December of 2029 when he will be 68 years old.
Okay.
His next parole hearing is currently scheduled for November 2028.
Okay.
Now, remember the Weatherbys, the couple that lived in the trailer park?
Yeah.
The people that Christian put in touch with Dee Dee while she was alive to take care of her?
Right.
Well, when Dee Dee sells the house she grew up in, she moves to this trailer park and they take care of Dee Dee. And when she dies, it's been said by Mrs. Weatherby that Christian got half of Dee Dee's estate and they got the other half. And if you go back to the will of Dee Dee, she did take her son John out of her will and add the Weatherbys. So did Christian make money when Dee Dee died?
Yeah.
And is that how he lived when he was sort of off the grid and nobody knew where he was?
Right.
That part to me is crazy.
Yeah.
To this day, Christian sits in prison maintaining his innocence. But one thing hasn't changed. His name. He is still Christian Gerhartsreiter. But that's his story. Con man, killer. But that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. Have you read any good books lately? Or have you listened to any good books? All of the Sex and Lies series books, as well as the Jane Doe series, are available on Audible and iTunes. Hotter than hell in half of Alabama, the Sex and Lies series begins with Sex, Lies, and Sweet Tea. There are 9 books to listen to in that series alone. Left as a newborn to die in a dumpster, she has no name. Tossed from foster home to foster home, she has no family. With no known past, she's deemed a perfect fit for a task force Washington denies exists. A selective assassin for the United States government, Jane Doe tracks down known terrorists on domestic soil. The Jane Doe books have been called a bit military, a bit assassin, and a bit genius. Start the new year by listening to a good book by me, Chris Calvert, on Audible or iTunes. Or if you'd like to read, go to chriscalvert.com and download some free books. And thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
My, oh my, Thurston Howell III, Gerhardt, Swinehart, whatever your name is.
I actually had to look up a Gilligan's Island episode because I wanted to see Thurston Howell. I mean, with the ascot and the hat and, oh, lovey, lovey. And then I thought, what is her real name? But if you look, her real name was Lovey on the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, lovely. Also, in case you didn't know, Gilligan's Island is based on the 7 Deadly Sins.
I did know that.
Yeah.
I did know that.
Yeah, I knew that. But then when I went back and I was researching Gilligan's Island, I saw that and I was like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, what's interesting about that, I'm going to name drop just for a second. I'm actually friends with
a Rockefeller.
Yeah, with Stephen Rockefeller. And
I know. I thought about that when I was
and the next time I
doing this.
text him or email him, I got to ask him about this case and how that affects
Clark.
Yeah, Clark.
Ask him about Clark Rockefeller because when it all came out, they were like, he is not a Rockefeller. We got receipts. We can show you he's not a part of our family. Yeah.
And in all transparency, I'm not like close friends with Stephen. I know him. We were associated in a project together. We became friends, and that was it. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm in the Rockefeller clan.
We don't go on the J boat.
I don't talk like that. Anyway. All right. Well, let's move on from that and let's do a little, well, bless your heart. All right, I've got 3 short ones for today.
Oh, we're doing rapid fire.
We're doing rapid fire.
Okay.
This first one is called Caught. Police in Ossining, New York, I think that's how it's pronounced, were called to a mini-mart where they found Blake Leak, 23, trying to break in. They chased Leak through the streets until both cops took a tumble. Seizing the opportunity, Leak sought refuge on the grounds of a large building. Unfortunately for him, well, that building was the Sing Sing maximum security prison where he was promptly nabbed by a guard.
Thanks for making it easy for us.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Loser. Okay. Second one.
Did you just go, loser?
Yeah, I did. The lowest high there is. For a trio of drug thieves, it was their lucky day. They broke into a home in Silver Springs, Florida, and discovered 3 jars of cocaine. They took it home and snorted the contents. That's when they discovered that the jars were, in fact, urns that contained the
cremains of the dog.
The cremains of the husband and 2 dogs.
Yeah. Oh, I knew that one.
Oh, my God. And the third one, watch where you're going. As 2 men waited in line at a coffee shop to pay their bill, a third cut in front of them. He threw a drink at the clerk, demanded all the money from the till. Temporarily surprised, the men quickly recovered and handcuffed the crook. Apparently, in his rush, the criminal didn't notice that they were police officers.
He cut in front of the cops at the
full
Starbucks.
Uniform. That's called being focused.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
I actually got a speeding ticket once on I-65 North through a construction zone. I was tired of being behind somebody really slow, and I passed when you weren't supposed to pass, and I went faster than you were supposed to go. And as I'm flying down the other lane, I realized the car in front of me was going slow because there was an Indiana state trooper in front of him.
There you go.
And I passed the Indiana state trooper, who promptly pulled me over.
Sorry about that.
And gave me a ticket.
Bummer.
I was focused, honey.
Wow.
I was focused.
Yeah.
That was a blonde moment. I mean, if you're going to change lanes and speed past everybody, at least speed past the state trooper, which I did.
Go big or go home.
Go big or go home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if you have a bless your heart, or somebody's heart who needs to be blessed, like mine, for passing the state trooper, go to hitchedtohomicide.com. There's a pull-down menu. While you're there, you can also suggest a case.
Yep.
We love it when you guys do that.
Yeah.
We're getting some really good ones.
Yeah.
I promise they're all on the list.
Yep.
We enjoy all of your feedback so much. Thanks for listening with us again this week. That's my amazing husband out there.
It's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.